So as I mentioned that whenever we start off with the audit, so the first thing that is done is that an engagement letter is signed. What exactly is an engagement letter? An engagement letter is simply a contract. An engagement letter is simply a contract. Now, what sort of a contract is it? The engagement letter is simply a contract between the client and between the audit firm. Now, this engagement letter actually covers up a lot of things. And what exactly are those things that the engagement letter covers up? So let's try to have a discussion about them. First of all, it says to the appropriate representative of management or those charged with governance of ABC company. First of all, it says that to the appropriate representative of management or those charged with governance of ABC company. So always remember that when you have an engagement letter, it's actually going to be addressed to the management. Why? Because when you are being appointed as an auditor, so you're being appointed as an auditor with reporting to the management and those charged with governance of ABC company. So what does it mention? It says the objective and scope of the audit. You have requested that we audit. Remember, it's actually mentioned. You have requested that we audit the financial statements. So what do you need to audit? It's actually mentioned about the document which you actually have to perform the work upon of ABC company. So it's actually the name of the company that's also mentioned because it's important, which comprise the balance sheet as at 31st December 2001, the income statement, the statement of changes in equity, the cash flow statements, and a summary of significant accounting policies and other explanatory information. So if I talk about it, this is basically going to be something where you would say that this is actually going to be something where you would say that we are actually mentioning what is included in the financial statement. What is included in the financial statement. So what are we mentioning here? We are mentioning here that what is actually included in the financial statement. So the first thing is we actually mentioned that what are we there to? We are there to perform the audit of the financial statements of ABC company. Now, furthermore, it says we are pleased to confirm our acceptance and our understanding of this audit engagement by means of this letter. So as I mentioned to you, that this audit engagement letter serves as a contract between the client and the auditor. So whatever the terms and conditions that have been discussed earlier are redundant, and it's just this engagement letter that actually prevails. So it says our audit will be conducted with the objective of our expressing an opinion on the financial statement. So what is the audit going to be conducted on? It's going to be conducted with the objective of our expressing an opinion on the financial statements. So that's something that you are going to do. You will be performing the audit with the objective of expressing an opinion on the financial statement. Now what next is that? So the next thing is that we mention about the responsibilities of the auditor. Now try to understand something. Firstly, as we discussed in the previous class also, that what exactly is the audit? The audit would actually mean that you are actually expressing an opinion on financial statements. So first thing is the audit would actually mean that you are actually expressing an opinion on the financial statement. Now what next is there? The next situation is that when you are expressing an opinion on the financial statement, so you need to understand something, which is basically the scope of work is actually on the financial statement. And you need to mention that what is included in financial statement. You need to mention that what is included in financial statement. So you need to mention that what is included in the financial statement. Now move a bit forward and try to discuss further. It says we'll conduct our audit in accordance with ISA. So that means the auditor is mentioning that the audit would be conducted in accordance with ISA. So the auditor would be complying with ISA. What I am going to do is I am going to list down all of the important things which are mentioned in the audit engagement letter, because that is actually going to help you understand that what an audit involves. Now what next is there? It says those standards require that we comply with the ethical requirements. So that means the auditor has to ensure that the auditor has a compliance with code of ethics. The auditor has to ensure that the auditor has a compliance with code of ethics. Then the next thing is basically we ethical requirements and plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance. Plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance. So the objective is to basically obtain reasonable assurance. What exactly do you mean by reasonable assurance? So reasonable assurance actually means it's a high level of assurance. Whenever we talk about the reasonable assurance, it's a high level of assurance. Whenever we talk about the concept of reasonable assurance, this reasonable assurance actually means it's a high level of assurance. Now what next is there? Let's try to understand this. The next situation is it says that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether financial statements are free from material misstatement. So what exactly is that? That the financial statements are free from material misstatement. So the reasonable assurance with an objective to establish that financial statements are free from material misstatements. I am going to explain each one of these terminologies as I move forward, but I'm just trying to explain to you that what is the basic concept of the audit. The audit is basically conducted by the auditor with an objective of expressing an opinion on the financial statement. The audit is performed in accordance with either. That means the auditor is following a specific rules, a specific law. The second thing is he is ensuring that he complies with the code of ethics. The third thing is that his objective is to obtain reasonable assurance to establish whether financials are free from material misstatements or not. Now, what does it say? It says the audit involves performing procedures to obtain audit evidence about the amounts and disclosures in financial statements. So what exactly do you mean by this? So this actually means that the audit involves performing planning and performing procedures. Planning and performing procedures with an objective of what? To gather the audit evidence. To gather audit evidence. Together audit evidence. So what is the audit performed with? It's actually performed with an objective of gathering the audit evidence. It's performed with an objective of gathering the audit evidence. Okay, now what next is there? Next is it says, the procedure selected depends on auditor's judgment. The procedure selected depends on auditor's judgment. So what does it say? That the procedures would depend upon the auditor's judgment. I'm going to explain each one of them. Just wait a bit. I'm going to explain each one of them, which is actually I'm highlighting, including the assessment of the material misstatement of financial statements, whether due to fraud or error. So that means it's actually mentioning to you that the misstatements could be due to fraud or the misstatements could be due to an error. An audit involves evaluating the appropriateness of accounting policies used and the reasonableness of the accounting estimates made by management. So basically what happens is we would also talk about the accounting policies. We would also talk about the estimates which are used by the management. So we'll perform our procedures onto these also. We'll perform our procedures onto these also. Because of the inherent limitations. Now what are these inherent limitations of the audit? So it says because of the inherent limitations of audit. Together with inherent limitations of internal control, there is an unavoidable risk that some material misstatements may not be detected, even though audit is properly planned and performed in accordance with ISA. So, material misstatement can prevail. So that's something that the examiner, that this ISA is trying to explain to you. It says in making our risk assessments, we consider internal control relevant to entities' preparation of financial statement in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate but not for the purpose of expressing opinion. However, we'll communicate to you in writing any significant deficiencies in internal control relevant to the audit of financial statement we have identified. So what does it say? It says that no report on internal control. What does it say? It says no report on internal controls. So there is actually going to be no report on the internal control that we are going to give. And also it says that the significant deficiencies would be highlighted. Okay. I'm not going to move on to the remaining part of the engagement letter right now because I've already mentioned many points from this specific one single part, which is the responsibility of the auditor. So I'm going to explain this specific part first, and then I'm going to move forward. So I'm going to explain this specific part first, and then I'm going to move forward. I'm not reading the engagement letter. Furthermore, I'm just keeping the engagement letter till here, and I'll explain few things which I've mentioned here. Now, let's talk about few things which are important and which are important to understand if you wish to understand the concept of audit. The first thing is, whenever we perform an audit, we are performing an audit with an objective of expressing an opinion on the financial statement. We'll comply with ISA and we'll comply with the code of ethics. So the first of all, the thing is that try to understand there's actually a regulator. There's actually a regulator. Now, what exactly do you mean by regulator? So regulator actually means that the regulator means the organization responsible for regulating the audit profession. Like in majority of the countries, what happens is the national accountancy body is usually responsible for regulating the regulating the auditing profession. So as I mentioned that in majority of the countries, what happens is it's actually majorly your regulatory body, the national accountancy body is majorly the regulatory body. So what happens is that first of all, you need to try and understand that if you are conducting an audit, so you have got an excessive amount of responsibility on your shoulders. Now, what is this excessive amount of responsibility on your shoulders? Remember, you are expressing an opinion on financial statements. And these financial statements would be used by the various stakeholders. And the major stakeholder include the shareholders. What type of shareholders? They could be the existing shareholders. They could be your past shareholders. They could be the prospective shareholders. So you need to understand this thing, that whatever that is expressed in the financial statement, you as an auditor is giving an opinion that financial statements give a true and fair view. So if you as an auditor is giving an opinion that the financial statements are giving a true and fair view, so there is a responsibility on your shoulders. And what is that responsibility of the shoulders? The regulator, what the regulator would do is that the regulator would regularly or on a random basis, what the regulator would do is that the regulator would, I'm repeating it again, that what would happen is that on a random basis, the regulator would what? The regulator would check the work performed by various auditors. Would check the work performed by various auditors, and in case if the regulator finds you to be negligent, then what happens is your license to audit is cancelled. Your license to audit is cancelled. We have seen in the past so many cases where the regulator has actually cancelled the license of the audit firm, cancelled the membership of the partner of the audit firm, suspended or removed the partner from the register for 4 years, 5 years, put a ban on the audit firm to perform any specific audit for the public company for X number of years. So there are many things that the regulator actually does in case if the regulator finds there to be a problem with respect to how things are actually performed, how the audit is actually handled. So now let's try to understand this concept. The concept is that if you are performing an audit, so while performing the audit, you have to ensure that you are following whatever the regulator has told you. And what the regulator tells you is that he prescribes ISA. He prescribes ISA. So it's actually compliance with the ISA that's important. It's actually compliance with the ISA that is important. If you're going to comply with ISA, you will go ahead. If you're not going to comply with the ISA, you will not be able to go ahead with the audit, because in case if you're not complying with ISA, that means you are negligent. So there are various ISA series. There is an ISA 200 series, ISA 300 series, ISA 500 series, ISA 600 series, ISA 700 series. These are the various ISA series that is there in your course. So with respect to these various ISA series that are actually there in your course, so what happens is you need to try and understand something. What exactly you need to understand, that is basically that whatever the ISA that is applicable, you need to follow that ISA. You need to apply that ISA. And while applying that ISA, you have to prepare the financial statements. You have to audit the financial statements accordingly, following the guidelines which is mentioned in the ISA. Similarly, there is also compliance with the code of ethics. Now, what exactly do you mean by complying with the code of ethics? So let me try to explain to you people. You see, what happens is there is a code of ethics for accountants. So there is an ethical standard board which is IESBA. Just like we have got IASB for issuing the accounting standard, we have got IESBA, and IESBA, what it does is IESBA actually issues the ethical standards. Now what actually happens is the various accounting bodies, what they do is that they adopt their these ethical standards. Like I talk about ICAW, what they've done is they've adopted this IESBA code and they've added few things. You cannot deduct anything, you just have to add up, that's it. Similarly, same goes for ACC also. ACC have adopted the IESBA code. They've added few things, they've customized it a bit, and that's what the code of ethics that is prevalent on ACCA. So every ACCA student, every ACCA member is actually bound by that specific code of ethics. Same goes for almost every accountancy body. Like in Pakistan also we have got ICAP, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. They've also adopted the code of ethics. They've also adopted the code of ethics. So we have got the IESBA code of ethics, which is being issued by IESBA, and that code of ethics is adopted by the various accountancy bodies, and they adopt it, and they actually make it mandatory for every single person, every single student, every single member of the relevant body to actually follow this specific code. So when I talk about the code of ethics, so remember that if you are performing an audit, so it's your responsibility that you are complying with ISA. Whatever the requirements in ISA are, you have to comply with ISA. And secondly, you have to comply with code of ethics. Now, let me explain to you one of the requirements of the code of ethics, and the requirement is that you have to be an independent. As an auditor, you have to be an independent. Now, what do you mean by independent? Let's try to understand. Whenever I talk about the concept of independence, so let's say you are a partner in an audit firm and you're going to audit a company. The CFO of that company is your wife. Now, I'm asking you a question. How can you be independent? How can you be independent? You have to ultimately go back and stay back at home with her. How can you be independent? You can't be independent. Ultimately, your wife, you have a relationship with her, and that relationship is actually going to make you biased. Your judgments would be affected. Your independence is going to be compromised. So if your independence is going to be compromised, that means you're not complying with code of ethics, and that means you should not go ahead with the audit. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. So basically, when you are performing an audit, so as I mentioned in the engagement letter, it's basically you are performing an audit with an objective of expressing an opinion. And with the objective of expressing an opinion, and you need to perform your audit by complying with the requirement of ISA. Now, you need to comply with the requirements of Code of Ethics also. And then what happens is you have to obtain a reasonable assurance that financial statements are free from material misstatements. Now let me explain to you this thing. Basically what happens is whenever we talk about the concept of material misstatement. So the word material misstatement has got two aspects to it. One of them is the word material and the other one of them is the word misstatement. I'm repeating it again. One of them is the word material and the other one of them is the word misstatement. Now try to understand this. You do understand the concept of material because we actually study material from the earlier studies, from the basic studies of accounting. So when we talk about the definition of material, so the definition of material is basically, whenever we talk about the definition of material, so definition of material actually means that an item is material if its omission can affect decision making of users. So if an item is basically, if something is there whose omission would actually affect the decision making of the users, if there is any piece of information which is not available, so that means what we are actually going to do is that we're going to term it as material. Now try to understand this. So basically what happens is, how do we establish if something is material? So the concept of materiality is a very much judgmental. Concept of materiality is very much judgmental. For example, if somebody who has got $1,000 in his pocket, even $30 is material. But for somebody who has got $10,000 in his pocket, $30 won't be considered as a material amount because that's relatively a very small amount as compared to what he has. So what happens is there are various thresholds that are given in the audit. So your book actually has got the various thresholds, which I'm not discussing right now. I'm going to discuss them later on when I'm going to explain materiality in details. But right now I'm just trying to explain to you the concept of material. And the second thing is misstatement. So for the time being, you can think about the misstatement as Non-compliance of accounting framework. Non-compliance of accounting framework. Now, what exactly do you mean by non-compliance of accounting framework? So try to understand this. Now, so non-compliance of accounting framework would actually mean that, for example, every single accounting standard has got various requirements. Now, what are the various requirements that every accounting standard has? So the various requirements of the accounting standards, they actually include that there is actually a recognition criteria. There's actually a recognition criteria that when would you recognize any asset, any liability, etc., etc. Then there is actually a measurement criteria. Then you've got the derecognition criteria. You've got the disclosure criteria. So these are the various requirements of the accounting standard. Now let's try to have an understanding. I'm just going to talk about measurement. So let's say that you have got a property, plant and equipment which must have been carried at its cost. But what you have done is you have carried it at its fair value. So if you have carried your property, plant and equipment at fair value instead of the cost, so this is actually a misstatement. If you have carried your property, plant and equipment at fair value instead of cost, whereas the accounting standard required you to carry them at cost, so that means this is actually going to be a misstatement. What is it going to be? It is actually going to be the misstatement. Okay, is it okay now? Yeah. Any other example apart from cost of fair model? Okay, I'm just going to give you another example. Now, for example, that what happens is that you charge the depreciation, and if you could recall from the earlier accounting, what you usually would have studied is that full year depreciation in the year of acquisition and non depreciation in the year of disposal, right? If you could remember. Now, if I talk about this policy may be okay with respect to the conventional accounting. I'm repeating it again. This policy may be okay with respect to the conventional accounting, but this policy is not okay with respect to compliance with the IFRS. Because when you comply with the IFRS actually mentions that you need to have a time proportionate depreciation. The IFRS mentions that you need to have time proportionate depreciation. So it's actually the time proportionate depreciation that you have to do when it comes to IFRS. Is it okay? So now, what actually happens is, that, yeah, sure, go ahead. Anyone who has a question, yeah, please go ahead. Yes, whenever you do something against the prescribed framework, that is considered to be misstatement. Whenever you do something against the prescribed framework, that is considered to be misstatement. Okay, now let's move a bit forward. So basically what happens is that as an auditor, what we do is that we try to establish that there are financial statements are free from material misstatement. Now let's try to understand how do we establish. So it says that planning and performing procedures to gather the audit evidence. Now basically, as I mentioned earlier also in one of my last classes, that for example, you have got, I'm repeating it again. For example, you have got, let's say, 100,000 sales transactions. And as an auditor, you have to establish that the sales value is correct. You have to establish that the sales figure mentioned in the financial statement is correct. So being an auditor, if you go on checking these 100,000 transactions, being an auditor, if you go on checking these 100,000 transactions, you would never end up. I'm repeating it again. Being an auditor, if you would go on checking these 100,000 transactions, you would never end up completing the audit. So what we actually do is that we take out a sample, we draw a sample, and the sample is actually drawn on the basis of our judgment, because as an auditor, you have to perform a risk assessment that where exactly could things go wrong? Where exactly could things go wrong in the financial statement? And that's actually your judgment. How do we get the judgment? It's based upon your experience. So on the basis of judgment, you draw a sample, and on the basis of that sample, you perform the procedures on those samples. You perform procedures on those samples. For example, if I talk about performing the procedures on the samples, so let's try to understand this. Basically, when we talk about performing procedures on sample, this would actually mean that for example, if I've taken one sale transaction, so I would probably inspect the sales order. I would inspect the dispatch of goods order. I would inspect the invoice. I would trace the receipt in the bank. I would trace it and I would trace the receipt in the bank. So that is all that I'm actually going to do. That is all that I'm actually going to do. So as an auditor, I'm going to perform various procedures, and the objective of my procedures is that so that I'm able to satisfy myself that everything is okay with the financials, or I've tried my best to identify if there is any misstatement I should identify. So I've tried my best. I performed every possible procedures that was possible, and on the basis of all this, I have now concluded that the financial statements give a true and fair view or not. So basically what happens is that, as I mentioned here also, that you have to obtain a reasonable assurance that financial are free from material misstatement. How? By planning and performing procedure to gather the audit evidence. How? By using your judgment. By using your judgment. Now, there is a comment that, so though if the auditor thinks that there is more risk, so he will have a larger sample size. And if he thinks that there is less risk, he will have a smaller sample size. Yes, exactly. This is how it is going to be. If the auditor thinks that the risk is high, he would have a larger sample size. If he thinks that the risk is low, he would have a smaller sample size. Now try to understand something. That what an auditor would do is that he's going to perform the procedures on the basis of his judgment. And on the basis of his judgment, he would actually decide that what exactly are the procedures that he has to perform. Now, there's a question that the audit fee would also be charged accordingly. Yes, because you see, you make an assessment of the client, that how big a client, you take an understanding of the business, and then you quote for the audit fee. Otherwise, you don't quote for the audit fee. And at times what happens is we also agree to the variable charge. Now, what exactly do you mean by agreeing to the variable charge? So let's try to understand this. We agree to the variable charge in this sense that we agree to the variable charge in this sense that we would say that we would charge you minimum X amount, and then whatever the number of hours that are going to be used, depending upon whether our partner applies the time, our senior applies the time, our junior applies the time, we'll charge you accordingly. Now, there are two more things, which was basically that the misstatement could be due to fraud or could be due to error. Now, remember this thing. I did tell you that what do you mean by misstatement? So the misstatement was actually non-compliance of accounting framework. Now, when we talk about non-compliance of accounting framework, so the non-compliance of accounting framework could be because of fraud or could be because of error. Now, when we talk about the fraud actually means it's intentional. And when we talk about the error, so error actually means it's not intentional. So when we talk about the fraud actually means intentional. And when we talk about the error actually means it's not intentional. Now, let's move a bit forward. So the misstatements could be because of the error. The misstatement could be intentional, both. So as an auditor, you have a responsibility that since you will be expressing an opinion on financial statement, so you have to make sure that you check out almost everything, whether the accounting policies adopted by the company are correct or not. Like when it comes to the inventory, you have got a choice. You can go for first in, first out. You can go for an average costing. So if the company has chosen a first in, first out value method, so is it an appropriate method that the company has chosen, or is it an incorrect method? What exactly is it? The second thing is when we talk about the accounting estimate, so remember the useful life is an accounting estimate. The residual value is an accounting estimate. There are many other accounting estimates, but I'm just trying to discuss with you the potential accounting estimates that you know as an accountant. Now, so let's try to understand this thing. Basically, what happens is that an accountant, that an auditor, what he does is that he tries to actually perform procedures on accounting policy, check the policy for reasonableness, check the estimates for the reasonableness. He would check the various transactions. He would just try to see if there is any material misstatement, so that he would try to perform as much procedures as he thinks is important, so that he can express an opinion. Now, there are two more aspects which I'm actually gonna share, and that is basically One of them is inherent risk, and the other one of them is basically internal controls. So the auditor also mentions in his engagement letter that he would try his best to perform the audit, but there could be a possibility that the material misstatement could prevail. What has the auditor mentioned? That he would try his best. He would try his best to perform the audit, but the material misstatement could prevail. Now, why would the material misstatement could prevail? Now let's try to understand. Now, so what exactly do you mean by the inherent risk? The inherent risk is basically the risk inbuilt in the audit. Now, why do we say the risk inbuilt in the audit? As I mentioned that the audit is performed on a test basis. It is performed on a selective basis, on a sample basis. So there could be an error that the sample drawn may not contain the mistake. There could be an error that maybe basically the transaction seems to be okay to the auditor, but it is not okay. Maybe the judgment could go wrong. So there could be multiple inherent limitations that the auditor actually faces. And lastly, when we discuss about the concept of internal controls, so let me explain to you what internal controls is. So the internal control would actually mean the initiative taken by entity to ensure that objectives are achieved. Initiatives taken by the entity to ensure that objectives are achieved. Now let's try to understand this. Basically, what is going to happen is that there are various internal controls which are implemented in every organization. Like for example, access control. Everyone cannot access any area. The passwords, the data encryption, etc., etc. So these are various types of internal controls that are prevalent in an organization. So an auditor makes it clear to the management that I'm not coming to express, I'm not coming in to give you a report on internal controls. Remember, I'm not coming in to give you a report on internal controls. Yes, but there are any significant deficiencies, we will highlight them. But it's not our responsibility to give them. So basically, what exactly is this engagement letter? The engagement letter is a letter that actually describes, it's a contract that describes the terms and conditions, the responsibility of auditor, responsibility of management. All of these are explained and defined. And when we talk about this, so it's actually multiple things are covered, which is it explains to us that the auditor would perform his audit in accordance with ISA. He would ensure that he complies with the code of ethics. He would try to obtain a reasonable assurance and that such to establish that financials are not materially misstated either because of fraud or error. He would apply his judgment together to perform the procedures such that he is able to gather the audit evidence. And what happens is that because of the inherent limitations of the audit, there could be a case that he may not be able to express the correct opinion. And lastly, the auditor is not going to give a report on the internal controls. Yes, but there are any significant deficiencies, he's going to comment on them. So basically, that's one of the part of the engagement letter that I have discussed. I've not completed the whole engagement letter. I've just discussed one of the part of the engagement letter. And my objective was that I wanted you people to understand what an audit involves. I wanted you people to have a mindset that what an audit involves, who does what is the objective of performing audit, how the auditor performs the audit. So I hope that this is clear to everyone that what exactly is the purpose of audit, how does the auditor performs the audit.